What's good, y'all? Abe here, coming at you on behalf of Art, Amani, and Andre, known collectively as the Straight A's. As of this fall, we've joined the National Association of Independent Schools podcast family, and you'll now find us on all your favorite platforms as PoCC On Air with the Straight A's. We've evolved into an official extension of NAIS's People of Color Conference, the flagship of the association's commitment to equity and justice in teaching, learning, and sustainability for independent schools. Our goal with this partnership is to raise up the many voices in and around PoCC that make the event a mainstay on NAIS's annual professional development calendar and have made it such a special space for the four of us over the last 3 decades. We've hopefully kept everything you came to know and love about the original Straight A's podcast: the thoughtful questions, the spirited storytelling, and of course, a steady dose of our trademark whatnot. For this episode, we're getting you ready for PoCC 2024 in Denver by throwing it back to PoCC 2023 in St. Louis. Join Amani and me for a conversation with Dr. Christopher Emdin, educator, activist, artist, author, and closing speaker at last year's conference. Dr. E sat down with us the morning of that closing session to rap about what keeps him up at night in the world of education, how we can make serendipitous moments less accidental, and why he considers science the most poppin' discipline. Enjoy the episode. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the final day of the National Association of Independent Schools People of Color Conference 2023 in St. Louis, Missouri. My name is Abe Wehmiller of the Straight A's podcast. I'm sitting across from my partner in crime, Amani Reed, and we are in our final day of PoCC On Air. And on this gracious Saturday morning, we are fortunate to have as our guest Dr. Christopher Emdin, educator, activist, artist, author, many other things that we'll probably get into. Chris, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
You know, we've been gathering all week, and there are 8,200 people here in this conference. We have about 2,000 students from schools around the country. We have educators from all sorts of NAS schools. It has been a palpable energy of coming together, the largest conference of this type ever for our association, and it feels like since the pandemic, it's the first time we've really hit our stride to be back together, to be back as family. So excited to have you join us today.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've heard of the conference. I've heard sort of like reverberations in the world about what the conference has been so far. And so I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to folks who are still left, the stragglers, the slaggers who didn't book their flights early enough. But I'm excited to engage with folks.
Good, yeah. Good. Talk to us a little bit about your journey into the education space. How did you come to do the work that you're doing?
I was a New York City public school kid who did not have the best time in school. I had aspirations to do anything but be in education because of how uncomfortable my experience was in schools. And even then, as a teenager, had ideas about how it could be done differently so that it could work for kids like me. So it went from this like, I would have liked if you guys did this, and I would have liked if you guys did that. And it translated into, man, I've got lucky that in spite of those negative experiences, I found myself an undergrad. And I found myself being lucky enough to be like a science major and lucky enough to stumble into like having some academic success. And then realizing, wait, this really was a set of serendipitous experiences that got me to be able to finish this thing. And I know so many people who were like me who didn't have that luck, didn't have those opportunities. And even then, like having that sort of like awareness of the dysfunctions of the system of education and finding myself having some modicum of success within it and thinking I had some ideas about it, I still didn't want to go into education. And then, entered biochemist by training, got a master's in natural sciences, did research in etiology of schizophrenia and mesenchymal stem cell research, went into industry for a little bit, and started realizing that all those experiences, my heart still would go around like reading an educational journal and find out what they're doing wrong. Did they fix it yet? You know, right?
When is it coming?
When is it coming? You know what I'm saying? When are they doing things for kids that look like me to be able to do well in it?
Right, because I've been telling you for years, right?
Because I've been thinking about it for
Yeah.
years. Because I've been curious about it for years. Because I've been like losing sleep at night about it for years, you know? And eventually I decided to go into science education. I wasn't being fulfilled in the science world. Somebody said, go work with some kids. It'll make you feel better, you know?
What age group did you start with?
Middle school.
Yeah.
Middle school, I started volunteering with some middle school kids.
Yeah, that'll fulfill you.
Oh man. and then it happens. We all know what it is. Like, you know, the kids,
They hook you.
they hook you. They sing that song when you explain something, you know, you explained, you know, how photosynthesis works. And they're like, oh, and I get it. Like, it's like your heart opens up. And I decided to try my hand at education for a little bit. Middle school teacher, and then went full-fledged. And then middle school teacher, and then high school teacher, and then I helped to start a school, and then I wrote a proposal for a school, and then I was a high school teacher, and then I was like a high school dean, and then I was like, let me get my doctorate, and then before you know it, I'm researching and writing and thinking about education. And in essence, man, resuscitating the ideas I had when I was 14 about how to do it better, except with more language, more research, more information, and more experiences.
A lot of times people don't feel comfortable going back and forth between research and practice. They want to spend time in the books thinking about it, writing about it, doing that scholarly work, or they really want to spend time doing the work with kids. How do you keep yourself both fresh doing both of those things?
Yo, you can't do both. You can't do one without the other.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. Like I have colleagues who, I was talking to somebody 3 weeks ago, and he was like, yeah, you know, because I had to take a 5-year leave from going into schools so I could write about schools. I'm like, idiot, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
In 5 months, things shift. You know what I'm saying? 5 weeks, the students have a different perspective. And so for me, I never approached the work seeing theory and practice are separated. In fact, if I ever had to choose one over the other, I couldn't do this anymore. I love being with students. I love being with teachers. I love being with heads of school. I love being with principals, helping to think through problems, helping to research ways to do it better, helping to troubleshoot ideas, helping to help folks who think it's working perfectly listen to a kid who's saying, it ain't working for me. Yeah, I don't think that theory can happen without practice. And it's not even just theory and practice. I think also it's theory, it's practice, it's ontology, it's philosophy. I think all those things are all wrapped into one. I think the only reason why we separate it out is because it's easier for academics to separate it out. But the way it works best in real life is all together at once.
I've had the pleasure of working in some of the higher ed space as well as in K-12 schools, and it's one of those things that we know is true about teaching and learning with young children, right? Intersectionality of themselves, who they are, understanding how an integrated curriculum helps them understand meaning and purpose and all of that. And somehow we forget that as we go all the way through the educational journey.
I don't even think we forget it, bro. I think we know it. I've never spoken to a teacher or a principal or a person who's like really invested in education, where I talk about interdisciplinarity and hybridity and multiplicity, and they don't say, oh yeah,
right.
They know it. And I don't think that they've forgotten it either. I think that the structure is built in schools where it's easier to do it a particular way, right? It's easier to adopt a tradition. Your subconscious tells you this ain't the right way to do it. Your heart tells you it ain't right the way to do it. The kids tell you it, but you're like, man, it's so much easier because I have this script. It's just easy to follow this thing. I don't think it's forgotten. And I think that's why a lot of folks quit, because after a while, their guilt starts kicking in. It's less about being burnt out. It's more about the activation of your knowing and the activation of the guilt of knowing and not adhering to what your soul says at the interest of what the task says to do. I think that's what gets folks frustrated, because otherwise you could do this stuff forever. Who could not work with kids forever? You know what I mean? Like, it's the dopest job ever.
And you've talked a lot about either why people quit or why there aren't enough black male educators. You've done work in that space too, trying to help make sure we as institutions understand the problem, what we can do better.
Fam, I done wrote about it in the articles. I done wrote book about it. I done rapped at PBS about it. I done showed up to conferences about it. And the goal of using those sort of multiple platforms is just that, to say like, listen, like, how do you need me to say this to you so you get it, right? Folks will oftentimes say, "Yo, Chris, you do the social media stuff, then you do the news commentary stuff, you do the books, the articles, like, why do you do all that? I'm like, so somebody would listen.
Yeah.
You know what I
Trying
mean?
to
Because
reach people where they are.
you got to. It's the pedagogue in me. You know, cultural relevance is not just for students. Cultural relevance is for people. It's not also revolving solely around race and class, although that's an impetus for engaging in that work. It's also about, like, you know, some folks culturally are more attuned to news media. Some folks are more culturally attuned to music. Some folks would just rather hear a podcast or would rather go to a talk. And so the philosophy, the work remains the same. The educator meets folks where they meet folks on their cultural turf.
This might be a variation on that question or that theme of, like, how are we supporting teachers and keeping teachers in the work? Before we came on, before we started recording, you were talking about this idea of playing to your strengths, right? As an educator, as a professional, right? And not necessarily following this preset path. I did this, so I had to do this, so I had to next do this, but finding that space that you exist in best and that really feeds your soul and feeds your work, and becoming deeply engaged in that particular space so you can be the best leader that you can be.
Yep.
As I heard you talk about your path, I heard you talk about trying a number of different things, right? Middle school teacher, high school teacher, dean, propose a school, build a school. How did you find your space where you were most effective and avoid that trap of, I have to do this because this is the next thing on the chart?
You know, I only do what makes me happy.
Yeah.
And my mission, my conviction, and my passion remains the same, right? I know who I am. I know whose I am. I know what drives my work. And I know what's been keeping me up at night since I was 13, right? Which is improving the system of education. Once that's in place, you could do it from multiple vantage points. And it's about finding the vantage point that works best for you, or constructing one that doesn't exist yet, that is a hybrid of all the different ones. So, like, there are things that I've learned from each of my, like, identities as an educator that allow me to be able to construct the self I am right now. It's like I'm equal, like I'm good with middle school kids, but I can't be with them every day. And, like, I love folks who can, and some folks can. I've learned it's not me.
Yeah, that ain't you.
So I create a career where I go kick it with middle school kids, you know, hour a month. I get my fix. I get to hear where they are.
Yeah.
I get to incorporate, and so for me, like, what I've been able to do is I've been able to carve out an identity professionally that allows me to be able to merge all the things I've learned across my journey to construct a self that allows me to be able to hit multiple vantage points, because I think I'm an anomaly, and I celebrate being an anomaly in that way. Like, I have job titles, but those things don't define me either. They're just the vantage point from which I can do what I want to do best, most effectively. And that's the way I look at it. And to me, I've had offers to do wild stuff. You know, I remember a news network that should remain nameless, you know, had me on for like a session. They were like, "Oh, we really like you. We'd like you to be, you know, a commentary, you know, on payroll to do commentary on whatever else it is." And then the next story they pitched me was something about sexuality and the animal kingdom. And I was like, "Yo, fam, you asked me to come in here to talk about education." And they were like, "Well, here's the check. But once you're on payroll, you got to talk about whatever."
Yeah.
And, you know, I had to say, well, that doesn't really play to my strengths.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, in title or in, like, visibility, that would have worked out great, but it doesn't play to what my calling is. I think if you stay true to who you are and you merge all your experiences, you find this sweet spot, and then you operate in your sweet spot.
You were talking about being on the news, and I can't remember which of the clips they introduced you, and then they turned to you and says, "What are you saying?" And I thought that was one of the funniest intros. Like, they had your bio, they had your introduction, and then they clearly acknowledged, I have no idea what it is.
What did you do?
It is what it is.
It was amazing. When I look at the canon of your work, you've touched on so many different areas, right? We talk about STEM a lot and how that has evolved and changed in schools. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be sort of your sweet spot and some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, you know, the STEM stuff really matters to me because it allows me to merge two of the things I care about the most, which is education. And by training, by passion, I'm a scientist. I love the beauty of science and math, right? I love being able to tackle a problem and just break it down to its pure essence and then build it back up. I love being able to apply established facts to make meaning of new phenomena. I love being able to manipulate numbers in ways that allow me to get more keen insight into something I want to study. So I just, by the way, this was not my thing in high school. I stumbled into it in college and I was like, ooh, I love this. This is fly.
Wait, you weren't inspired by science until you got to college?
So I got to college.
Wow.
Wow.
I took an undergrad course, and this lady was like, you could work in my lab. And I was like, you could work in a lab and actually not just memorize stuff, but do things? And I was like, well, this is crazy. And fell in love with science then. And through that, fell in love with math, because I needed a lot of math to do the science research, and then became a STEM person. And this is why I was sharing with you earlier, like, I think about my journey and I'm like, yo, it can't be accidental for another kid. Because it was accidental for me, right? Like I happened to be in a class of this one lady who said you can possibly work in the lab. If I didn't have that class, it wouldn't have happened. And so like, how do we make some people's serendipitous moments intentional and deliberate and non-accidental? It's been my work. But then, you know, that my STEM work, and then, you know, in education, I was always a science and math teacher. In many ways, I've been positioned as a generalist, because like I talk about the system writ large, but my passions lie in STEM and education. So my STEM work is really, really probably closest to who I am as a human being. I do the other stuff. I could do curriculum, I could do leadership, you know, I could do the things, but the STEM and STEAM work, like that's the stuff that like captures who I am.
And you just published something else that was either coming out or on its way, right?
Yeah, my last book is called STEM, STEAM, Make Dream, Reimagining the Culture of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And it's one of the favorite things I've ever written, because it allows me to trouble the sociological dimensions of disinterest in STEM, right? You know, how young folks are introduced to the disciplines, what they think math is, how they're unaware of complex areas of math, like ethnomathematics young folks aren't aware of, that if you're making and creating and dyeing fabric, that you're actually a scientist, that engineering is a way of thought, not a degree to attain. So in STEM, STEAM, Make Dream, I really trouble what it means to be in STEM and STEAM. I expand out the A in STEAM to not just be just arts, but I think the A is authenticity, and I think it's also ancestry. If you pull that A and make it about art, authenticity, and ancestry, you get a wide swath more of young people engaged in STEM. So yeah, it's a dope little book, and in it I have a lot of anecdotes, a lot of interviews. Like I interviewed Neil deGrasse Tyson. I interviewed the gentleman who invented the super soaker, you know, water gun, Leland Melvin, who's an astronaut. Like I got to see folks who've been really successful in STEM, who take non-traditional paths to it, that don't align to the paths that schools take in introducing those subjects to young people. And just to present a different model.
So it's not just dry, it's not just in the book, it lives and they can experience
STEM
it.
is lit, science is fly. Like it's are you kidding me? Like it's like, it's the most poppin' discipline. You know, you could break things down and build
do anything.
You can it's anything. You know, and I just think it should be introduced that way.
Yeah.
You know?
So you also exist in not just sort of multiple areas of education, but multiple types of schools, right? So you've done work in urban education. You mentioned before, again, that before we got on the air, you're an independent school parent. I'm curious to hear, like, as you explore all those different educational spaces in which you operate at multiple levels, you know, middle school, high school, higher ed, like, and you think about that landscape, and then you're here at this conference for independent school educators, and you're getting ready, as you said, to speak to this group of independent school educators. Where do you see independent schools and kind of the purpose of independent schools fitting into that larger school landscape in which you've had a chance to operate?
I think independent schools are the most rife for radical possibility, because they, in many ways, sit outside of the contexts of traditional public schools. In the sense of there's a strand of autonomy that exists, right? Sure, you have accreditation boards, and you all have the things, but just in philosophy, the notion of independence in itself connotes the ability to be able to lean into a particular philosophy that works well for the population that I have. Mm-hmm. We also know historically that independent schools have been the pathways for possibility for marginalized populations that have been underserved in traditional schools. I mean, Black kids who go through independent schools many times suffer a lot of trauma, but their pathways to Ivy League institutions and new possibilities, you know, the numbers don't lie. The independent schools have done a good job in that endeavor as well. And then I also think that there's a certain nimbleness that independent schools have the potential to engage in if they choose to. That I don't think they do a good job at exercising that nimbleness, but it sits there and it's always there. And so I think it's very ripe for potential. If I think about independent schools in the context of other schools that I work in or with, my children go to an independent school because the philosophy of that school was not like any I could find in any traditional public or charter school, right? Like, I wasn't looking for an independent school. I was looking for a space for my Black babies to feel like they could see themselves, that's wrapped in a social justice sort of anchoring, that had educators who were not stifled by curriculum, and that had a history and a background and a future vision of allowing students like my children to thrive. So that was my criteria. And I found a space that could work, and it was an independent school. And I think that the capacity to hit those benchmarks for a parent like me is there in a number of schools. Their willingness to do so is on them, but the potential and the capacity is there. I also like to think about the fact that anybody who works with babies, I want to work with, right? The pathways to get there vary. The philosophies vary. Who founded you varies. Like who you're like, all that stuff varies. But you work with children with hopefully the goal of allowing them to become their best selves in the world. And once that's the case, holler at me and I'm there. You know what I mean? Like then I got to bring that triangle offensive improved pedagogy. I like to call myself the Phil Jackson, the teacher learn. You know what I'm saying? We go in there, we orchestrate a plan to get the best out of your people.
Yeah.
And then I've also been to schools, independent or not, who I am keenly aware from the second I walk in the door, this ain't about the kids at all.
From the moment
my spidey senses start tingling. I could walk in and I feel it. And then what I do in those instances, I just walk out.
In your work, in our conversation, you come back to sort of who we are innately, like at our core. I hear that in the inspiration that you talk about your work and your children and your family. I think about how hard it is sometimes to bring our complete selves to our work. One thing I'm also curious about is you bring your complete self all the time. And one of the things we also know you're passionate about is music.
Facts.
And hip hop music, right?
Facts.
We can't get this far into the conversation without talking about hip hop ed and some of that work that you're doing. I have all kinds of questions about your musical interests, but we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
But let's talk about hip hop ed too first. Started kind of grassroots Twitter, social media moment, and now it's a podcast, it's a movement, it's a thing. Talk about that.
So whoever's listening is not watching me smile right now. But I'm smiling right now. Hip hop ed for me is just the opportunity to undo what corporations have done to hip hop and do it with authenticity and truth in the interest of serving the next population who inevitably will be connected to this cultural artifact because it's in our DNA. So let me break that down a little bit, because that was a lot, right? Hip hop is a way of knowing and being and existing in the world that was birthed out of marginalization and loss. Some kids in the Bronx, when they ran a highway through their neighborhood and burnt down all the buildings for insurance money and could not get into the studios to be able to go to clubs and literally had no electricity, had nothing. And then there was a divestment of arts from their schools, so they didn't have any instruments. And literally, these are kids who had zero. And we're like, well, if we have zero, what can we make out of nothing? All we got is our voice. We got a beatbox. Somebody can maybe scrounge a turntable, and we're gonna have a party. In the middle of brokenness, we're gonna create a party. Hip hop is literally the most oppressed population in the world saying, I refuse to go down without a fight. I will celebrate my way into my death. Because that's what it looked like. It looked like we're gonna write them off. Y'all gonna say it's over? Fine, at least we're gonna turn up. And in the middle of turning up, constructed a cultural phenomenon that then became the most widely consumed musical artifact on the globe. From 0 to 100 real quick. So I love that about just the story of hip hop. Kool Herc.
Say shout out to DJ Kool Herc.
Right.
Kool Herc, you know what I mean? Kool Herc, coming from Jamaica, an immigrant, low poverty. But all he knows is that when I was in Jamaica, we had these folks who were toasters and partiers. These folks ain't got nothing else. Let me offer them that. I mean, just think about this borrowed culture, scrounging out of nothing, and then constructing this thing that was a voice for the voiceless. And then, as is the case with hypercapitalism, corporations go, whoa, look what they're making with nothing. What if we invest a couple dollars into this thing and then sell back to them the thing that they created with nothing? And so from the very inception of hip hop, and its beauty and its magic as a stop the violence movement, peace, love, unity, and having fun. Let's not fight each other. Let's just battle on the mic. Like all these anti-violent, pro-culture, pro-peace, pro-love phenomena, corporations said, listen, we can sell this to them. And if you want to sell it to them and corporate America, you better sell them a story that corporate America wants to hear. Well, let's highlight the drugs, the violence, the gangster. Let's create a record label. So I don't want to give you a whole historical thing, but you got a beautiful culture that's a response to brokenness that gets corporatized, and the corporatization is about the thin slice that is problematic and selling that back to the same population in the world. So this is why hip hop ed matters to me. It's an opportunity to reclaim the inception of the culture, right? Beats, rhymes, culture, truth, memory, activation of imagination around content. Teach teachers to learn how to teach from how MCs perform on stage. Not the corporate stuff, just how MCs engage on stage. Have kids write rhymes about the math or the English or the social studies. Have breaks in the classroom where they do some b-boying and some DJing. And then I got a crew with me of folks who believe the same thing I believe, right? Across initially Twitter, 2 people, then 5 people, then 10 people, then we trended worldwide on Twitter a couple times. Then we went from Twitter to Twitter Spaces, and then now there's like our programs are across. There's Hip Hop Ed Chile, Hip Hop Ed Barcelona, Hip Hop Ed in Canada, and it's now a movement of folks who are not going to accept that a corporate constructed version of our beautiful culture is all the culture is. So Hip Hop Ed makes my soul happy because it's about reclaiming, redefining, and then making it accessible to everyone, so that Black educators and white educators and independent school educators and kids in the hood and suburban educators who are all consuming the culture anyway cannot just get the version of it that tells tales of doom and gloom, but of possibility and education.
I love it. And if you watch any of the hip hop ed stuff, you see the joy in the kids trying to make their mathematical algorithms flow into something else. It is magic to watch.
Well, and it's both. What I'm hearing in your description of it is it's like equal parts history lesson, the reclaiming piece, but then also pedagogical tool, right? Like here, let's first learn it, and then let's learn how to use it, right? So it's got this practical application in the classroom, and so it's gonna be valuable because you're gonna know the true history, but it's also gonna be valuable because you can put it in action going forward.
You spit in facts, beloved. If you don't know your history from whence you came, then you will accept the narrative about yourself that was constructed by your enemy. That's the case with hip hop or in any phenomenon, right? They say, in any war, the victor gets to write the history, right? And with hip hop, the folks who made the most money get to tell the story. And so for us to be able to reclaim who we are and have a new generation of young folks get it, I think it's so important. And you're right, it's a pedagogical tool, it's a philosophical approach, but it's also a history of our culture and our truth and our magic. And me, like my whole thing, y'all could know this about me, my whole thing is why not do it all at once? Why not? Just because other folks don't have the capacity, the intellectual capacity and maturity to be able to handle multiple things at once, doesn't mean that those who can are at a deficiency.
That's right. Don't let that hold you back.
Nah.
We can't help but also not talk about your book, because that sort of feels like, as you tell that story, for white folks who teach in the hood and the rest of y'all too, New York Times bestseller, it also feels like you're marrying that part of it too. Like, it's not just about us. And if you want to be on this journey, here's what that means. Yeah. Here's how you get on board. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of that book and your work?
Yeah, the book was, it's very interesting. The book was a journey and also a labor of love. I got advised by a million people not to name my book that. Right?
And yet,
I do what I feel in my soul to do. But so there's that part. When the book initially dropped, I've got, people who told me, people without reading the book, I had this lady write me an email, it was like 4 pages thick, calling me everything but a child of God. And then she was like, and if I ever read the book, and I'm like, fam, you didn't even read the book. How you gonna tell me I'm racist if you didn't read the book? And I also feel like that book also spurred on and brought forth a cadre of books in the education space and beyond that named race and named whiteness, and I'm really thankful for that as well. But it was just what was in my soul and my heart at the time. It's a book that was equal parts instructional and philosophical, And it was a book that existed as a labor of love. I didn't say, F white people, I don't like y'all. I said it's for y'all and the rest of y'all too. I think folks just misconstrued that. I think sometimes when you just name whiteness, that becomes seen as problematic. In reality, it literally was, you're like 85 to 88% of the teachers in schools across the board. You're dealing with young folks of color who may come from challenging backgrounds and experiences. Let me just tell you some things that you might need to know. Like I think it was more of love than hate or any sort of. It wasn't vitriolic, but it also held folks accountable. And why I love that book till today is because it allowed me to tell my truth, but it also allowed me to give research. Right? It wasn't like just empty platitudes. It was research rooted. It helped me to give strategies. There are things in there that you can actually implement tomorrow.
Concrete.
And then it also allowed me to give like some quotes or some bars that can inspire folks. Like, so today people come up and be like, oh my gosh, Dr. E, I read for White Folks Teach the Hood. On page 42, you said, and I'm like, yo, give thanks. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then some folks say, Dr. E, I read for White Folks Teaching the Hood, and I implemented cogenerative dialogues, right? So I get different responses from different people. They've taken from it what they need, and that to me is the ultimate gift. So I'm thankful for that book and the impact it's made in the world, for myself, for scholars, for thinkers, and also other authors. And then actually and one thing I learned for white folks was like, it's me, a black educator and researcher and scholar and thinker, offering some perspective to white folks and the rest of us too. But it's also important for white folks to talk to white folks about what works, given the philosophies in the book, right? It should not always be the burden of black folks to tell white folks how to teach better black kids or other kids. And so I convened some white educators who I love and respect and who are actually doing the work and ain't fronting, you know what I'm saying? And I said, y'all read my book. What would you say to your folks? Go talk to your people. You know what I'm saying? And the hood would say, yo, go get your mans, yo. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so it's like, yo, go get your mans. Like, what you want to say to your people? Yeah. And so myself and Sam Seidel sort of edited this beautiful collection of essays, and we shared some commentary in it as well. I think it's a perfect bookend for white folks. Like, hear me telling y'all what to do, here's your people telling y'all what you should be doing, and having those books talk to each other, I think will offer something really beautiful for the world of education.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I know we have to start wrapping soon. Can I ask one other question?
Yes, you can.
So one of the things I appreciate having read and learned a lot about you is your openness around your musical interest. You're a West Coast, East Coast guy, at least have been for a while.
Yeah.
But your hip hop roots are deeply, deeply New York.
Facts.
So if I understand this right, greatest of all time, or at least top of your list, you have Tribe Called Quest.
Yes.
And you have De La Soul.
I do.
Jungle Brothers aren't there. I want to know why.
Oh, Lord.
And,
there's always smoke. There's always smoke for me.
What I love about it is you're always claiming it. You're always claiming it, and it's true in terms of the stories they tell.
Yeah.
But tell me how hip hop, and those artists in particular, influenced who you were coming up.
I start with De La. De La Soul they were the first legitimate as in credible to folks in the culture, respected for their lyricism, group, who was like, I'm not the trope.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna wear 60s garb and attire in the 90s. I'm gonna showcase peace and love and soul. I'm gonna rhyme with a different rhyme pattern. I'm gonna be talented and I'm gonna be skilled, but I have the space to be able to show up as I see myself and not have to extract out my blackness.
No more, no less.
To be different and still be dope. Because you gotta be dope. So I love De La for that. Rest in peace, Plug One. And then like Tribe for the very same reasons. Because I love the way that Q-Tip, like Tip is just like smooth and mellow and like just on point and like effective. And then Fife was just like energy. And I just love the juxtaposition. And frankly, that embodies who I am as an individual. Like I could turn up and I could be real mellow. And I think that the group represents a piece of all of us. Yeah. That we all have a Tip in us and we all have a Fife in us, right?
I love that.
And then there's Consequence, shout the Consequence, just dope lyricists. And they added folks, they extracted folks, Ali Shah, you know what I mean? So I just love how that represented the fullness of my humanity for those two groups. But I can't talk about groups, we can't talk about solo artists, I can't talk about groups. Always favorite group of all time will always be Wu-Tang. Shout out to my bro Jizza. That, like forever and a day, it's Wu-Tang forever.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You talk about, hip hop as a teaching tool, and I'm recalling this moment that I had in a class I was teaching this fall, where we were talking about the skill of grounding yourself in the text for evidence, right? And I went to Stakes is High in the lyric, right? Like every word I say should be a hip hop quote.
Yes.
And then we had to unpack it, right? And we had to learn about the source. And we had to learn about, right, 5 mics, and it just went deeper and deeper and deeper. But I was thinking about this, I was thinking, yeah, like that's how you can find these ways to apply it, right?
Yo, so you just, y'all need to do a video podcast, because
we gotta get you,
y'all want to listen, and I got people, the energy in the room and the space right now, but I love that you said that, because one of the things that I think about when I think about hip hop is hip hop as text. So it's text to be decoded, to make meaning out of, you can learn anything about meter and rhyme and syncopate, whatever it is, do that. So it's text. It's also a philosophy, an approach to looking at the world. It's also a pedagogy, right?
That's right.
It's also a musical art form. It's also a mode of art. Like hip hop is everything and none of it all at once. What other phenomena on the planet do we have that can give us all of that? I would argue that they're very, very few.
Yeah.
So I love the way that you describe that as text as well as a pedagogical strategy. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's been our theme all week. Yeah. We have, maybe it's 50 years of hip hop that are bringing us to that point.
It's taking us back.
Maybe it's the our childhood experiences, that shared experience, but it has truly been a theme from day one. Finding different artists who inspire us.
Ask that final question.
So at the end of the day, you've had the toughest day possible. It didn't go your way. You got that 4-page email. You are getting ready to go home. Whether you're walking home, you're on the train, you're in your car. What is the song that you put in your headphones that brings you closure, that brings you peace, and brings you ready to enter into your family fully capable to be present?
Damn.
What's that song?
That's I got a whole playlist. I literally have a Letting Go playlist on my Apple Music. I think right now, for me, a song that sort of brings me peace is probably Giant Steps, Coltrane. Not even a hip hop track.
Excellent choice.
Yeah. But that's always the one.
That is fantastic. Wow. We have heard all sorts of things in terms of what comes out, and I will say, including your response, it is never where I expect it's going to be. We expect sort of high energy to be high energy. We expect folks who maybe are more quiet and reflective to land there. And we have heard all genres of music. I will share over the course of the week, Stevie Wonder or Stevie Wonder samples have been the theme or the thread, but Coltrane,
So you know what y'all got to do, right? Y'all have to come up with a podcast playlist.
Yes.
Well, we've been trying to get the rights
to
be able to do that and figure out how we do it right. But we definitely need to pull that together.
Yeah, that's going to be lit.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to subscribe to your Letting Go playlist.
Yeah,
too,
I need to see that one.
Hit me up, Apple Music. I got you. Say less.
I need to see that one.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, Dr. E, thanks for joining us this morning. This has been a great way to wrap up our time here at PoCC On Air with the Straight A's National Association of Independent Schools People of Color Conference 2023. We're very much looking forward to seeing you close out the conference on stage today. Can't wait to see what that looks like. Can't wait to see what the walkout music is actually when you come on stage. I'll be interested to see where you land there. But thanks for being with us. Thanks for the work that you're doing. Thanks for engaging with the folks here at the conference.
Yeah, let's keep recording while I say this. I want to say to both of you, I appreciate your creating a space to make me feel comfortable. I appreciate your energy and your enthusiasm. I appreciate that you were thoughtful about the stuff. It's like things that you thought about, like it wasn't just like arbitrary. Chris is here, let's just ask him some things. And I also appreciate that you're doing this. I think sometimes when we do this kind of work, it's a labor of love. It's like, why are they doing this? And consistently doing it. As somebody we did a hip hop podcast series, I recognize the labor in being consistent in constructing something for other people. And so I just want to say to y'all, I appreciate y'all for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thanks again for being here. I do wish we had it on video because the energy was powerful.
It was lit.
It was lit.
We'll put that in the notes. NAIS. All right. Give us a mic.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the close of the conference.
Peace, y'all.
All right, y'all. That's our episode for today. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and that if you're on your way to Denver for PoCC 2024, you're even more hyped for what you're about to experience. Look for us in the convention center, where we'll be interviewing conference organizers, speakers, maybe even some of you. Be on the lookout for another episode drop soon after the conference, and additional drops with a mix of new and previously unaired content throughout the winter and spring. And if you found yourself vibing with this episode, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Take care now.